Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of video game news. Today is Friday, November 29th, also known as Black Friday. Now, my computer, ever since I built it, which honestly, I think the computer I've built most recently isn't even that old. Honestly, I think the newest computer I just bought and haven't gotten around to putting together may have only slightly, like one generation above quality CPU in it. 7800 versus 7800 3D XT. So yeah, hopefully I don't run into the same problems, but the computer I built has just had this weird thing where something goes wrong. And when something goes wrong, it does seem like it wants to default change the BIOS settings. So it's probably a motherboard issue. If I was to guess, it might be a Windows issue or an NVIDIA driver issue, but certainly I'm just not having the level of stability that I've had in the past as far as a computer build, and so I'm just having to go back into the BIOS and reset that. And so yeah, I think part of it is in the AMD CPUs in the BIOS, it is just trying to overclock itself just by default. That is the setting to try and overclock it, and so I've hopefully turned that off and told it to actually underclock it by 100 megahertz, which is a insignificant loss really for stability, particularly if I can turn the RAM speed back up, because I was previously just turning the RAM speed slower and slower, and that too was not really helping that much. But yeah. And yeah, I know I kicked a plug that was connected to one of my monitors, which probably triggered the whole issue, but it's kind of crazy that a monitor gets unplugged and then your whole BIOS resets. But that's what happened at the last stream, so yeah. When it rains, it pours. I'm still in a major emergency. I'm having to do a lot of house cleaning, and in that, my knee has started to hurt. And so I'm having to take even longer breaks, watching a lot more anime and live streaming stuff to take longer breaks. And frankly, I've been doing house cleaning long enough now that I can feel my own motivation is starting to wane a little bit on that. Not that I have much of a choice, but certainly you always start with a burst of energy, and now it feels like there's less and less desire to work that fast and that hard, when absolutely I need to work fast and hard. But yeah, I will say I think seen all there is available on Hulu in the United States of the Overlord anime, which, boy, I don't know why people sing the praises of that series. Maybe people just talked about it a lot, or maybe I just saw it a lot because it was advertised. But that second season in particular was really, really uninterested in the main characters and protagonists at all. And Demon Lord Retry also kind of has that same problem. And so I decided to do something different. Instead of watching yet a third fantasy overpowered isekai anime, I watched a fantasy overpowered isekai where the character is a child who's just running a laundry business called something, I think it's By the God's Blessing is the name of it. And it's this kid that has a bunch of slimes that he trains and tames, and eventually ends up running a laundry business and getting encouraged and showing himself capable. Actually, it's not a kid, it's a earthling that died and was reincarnated as a kid. But yeah, what's funny about it is it really is just 2 seasons of running a laundering shop with minimal side quests on raising and evolving slimes. Like, there aren't entire arcs where he goes and hunts a specific character or tries to do more adventuring. It really is maybe one episode a season where you might see him fight a character, or one character might be fought in one episode as not even the main thing. And secretly behind it really is a criticism, particularly on the Japanese way in which they run their businesses and economies. Since he was a human that was exploited as a Japanese human in his previous life, he's trying to run this laundry shop in a much more ethical way in a fantasy world where it is the name of the game to exploit people as way more than even the Japanese people get exploited. So by making the saccharine sweet anime, the trick, I imagine, was that the Japanese creator was hoping to convince more Japanese people to realize that they're being exploited, and really just encourage managers to stop exploiting them, or businesses to stop exploiting them. There is no talk of unions or anything that would really guarantee better workplace conditions for all. It's really only a fantasy hope that all Japanese companies, particularly the black site companies, the black companies, would just be shamed into doing the right thing. And inherently, it's still playing a part of the system of capitalism. It really isn't a direct criticism of capitalism, where I personally would probably make a direct criticism of the capitalistic way in which Japan was set up after World War II by the United States, and how it has proven itself to be the primary example of where capitalism is going to go with everybody, in that the populace is going to become so overworked and unenthused about living lives and having families that you're going to see this significant population decline. Of course, the Japanese government themselves, a lot of the politicians are pretty crazy, still don't really see that or get that or want to admit that. So even in that, they are trying to think up schemes to encourage, force, or trick women into having children instead of fixing the core lack of lifestyle problems and lack of diversity as far as what your lifestyle can be and where your lifestyle can be in Japan. And yeah, Japan would probably be a prime place, since the Japanese follow orders so well, to do a new experiment in a completely different economic style. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is some kind of economic governmental revolution that eventually happens in Japan, where they sharply twist, probably too far away from capitalism, into either a different system that's already been established or something else totally new, something closer to socialism or Marxism or communism. I don't know if Marxism really is an economic thing. Of course, none of this has anything to do with video games, other than Japan creates a bunch of video games. But yeah, that's what I've been doing. Today's Black Friday also. It'd be interesting, I suppose, if there was a lot of people watching today. As far as the Black Friday sales go, looks like there's some decent sales. I know that Nicholas, the makers of The Binding of Isaac, at the moment has a sale on their store. As part of the Steam sale, their Steam Awards are here, and I said I would pick my selections off screen, and that is what I've done. The first couple, I feel like, are probably fairly accurate. Game of the Year going to Black Myth Wukong. Makes a lot of sense. If you must give a VR Game of the Year, Riven, it probably makes a lot of sense. Then I'm doing my usual gag of renominating time clickers every year, as a labor of love. I actually ran time clickers, and at least at the beginning of the game, it doesn't seem like it's changed too much. And since I lost progress on that, I probably wouldn't want that running. There's a decent chance that Balatro is the right game for best game of the Steam Deck, but mostly what I'm doing is selecting from popular and recommended games for the rest of these categories, and mostly maybe selecting things that I just think should win something, but perhaps not the actual award that I'm selecting. Like Helldivers 2 probably should win something, but maybe not Better with Friends awards. Outstanding visual style anime may not be the right one for Metaphor ReFantagio, but then like Silent Hill 2 also probably shouldn't win Outstanding Visual Style Award. But I do think Metaphor ReFantagio does probably deserve some awards. And one thing I will say is it does seem like this would be the year, if ever, to see more anime style and Japanese inspired and Japanese centric games winning awards, as the Japanese have just been more consistent in releasing anything this year. But I imagine we will still see things like the Game Awards and just in general large snubs happening for Japanese games. So I think Silent Hill 2 should win something. I have no idea how well Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is, but I know Dragon Ball does probably deserve something. You get into some weirdness with the Steam Awards, in particular in that there are games that have been just released to Steam that are actually fairly old compared to console releases, which means things like the Jeff Keighley Game Awards would almost certainly not give any kind of award to the re-release of the Kingdom Hearts series, but on Steam he probably does deserve an award. I do think Stalker 2 is just going to be a more recent game, so it probably will win an award. And then the Sit Back and Relax award didn't have really a lot of good things to pick, unless you were going to go with Trading Card Shop. Interestingly, on this list, you're missing the grocery store simulator game. And while I would like to see Dreamlight Valley succeed, I can't really say it deserves an award in my mind. I could see Web Fishing also winning an award. Things like Chained Together is probably not a sit back and relax game, unless you're doing it, dominating it ironically. But yeah, I don't really expect House Flipper 2 to win anything. But your task was to nominate at least one game, nominate a game for each category, play a game I nominated, which in my case was Time Clickers, and then review or update your review, which I did, which then gives me a badge, which the badge here is not really connected in any way to the trading cards and system, which I imagine still somewhat exists, but is definitely not prioritized. So that pretty much is the Steam Awards until the next sale, or the next event, which was the winter sale, yeah. At which point your nominations very possibly are not going to even make it to the selection, and at which point you actually are going to have to pick from nominations that just won by popular vote, I would assume. The problem with award shows in general, but particularly with the Steam Awards, I think it gets highlighted even more, is just how pointless the whole system feels and how unimportant it really seems. Even in this, your nominations don't get remembered. You can't highlight them on your page for each year or have a history of what you nominated for each year. You're not given any kind of reward if you pick the winner, so it's not really gamified, which is probably a good thing, but it just makes the whole system feel pointless. And in a lot of ways, it does just feel like participation awards for the games, because the games themselves are clearly awarded by getting money and sales, and that's all they should care about, and that's all they really can care about. And a lot of times, even games don't care about their overall sales as much as they care about their launch window sales. But yeah, that's about as much as I can say on the Steam Award. I also noticed here that the Godot engine has a statement on something called God Loader, which is a malware loader that apparently has been using Godot as its runtime to execute malicious code and infect unaware users with known malware. So we are seeing here an open source game engine being used to develop malware, which is almost certainly the case. And I don't think they can say too much here to help secure that, other than make sure you have the latest patches of security patches or the latest version of Godot, and not download and execute things from untrusted websites, and perhaps give more faith than you really should to storefronts like Google Play and Apple Store and Steam and Epic Games Store and Windows Store. I would really put significantly less faith in the Windows Store. And be wary of cracked software, which is a prime attack vector for malicious actors. Is it though, really? I don't know. I imagine there's some of that that's true, and I imagine there's some of that that is very much just not true. But yeah, the Godot engine and the Godot organization really can't do much there. The only thing I guess it could do is severely try and restrict types of access, which it probably should go down the path of thinking that, since the Godot engine is a game engine, it should not really be making operating system level calls that would be the equivalent of a root execution. There's just kind of no reason for that. I'm just noticing that the plus one of my extensions should be toggled off, and it's not, so I wonder if my macro didn't run all the way through. Well, if it didn't, it didn't, and that'll just be it for today. It looks like more than enough has happened. We can see Stalker 2, Heart of Chernobyl, is making its way very quickly up the ladder, potentially surpassing Black Myth Wukong, and if it surpasses Black Myth Wukong for even a few weeks, it'll overall be more of a relevant experience. Then, after adjusting all of my settings on my computer after it messed up at the very end of the last stream, which that was weird that it just happened at the end of the stream like that, because I really wasn't doing anything different. I did run 3D Mark, I believe is the program I ran, just to do kind of a stress test, and it is kind of sucky to see the frame rates that their newest test really gives me. It's like 25 frames per second. I do think my graphics card, which is much older, is probably a major issue there. But the newest test versus Time Spy, which is the second to newest test on 3D Mark, I think is also a little bit more simplified. There's kind of less of a thought that CPU rendering at all matters as its own separate test, which Times by does like 2 GPU tests and a CPU test. Half-Life 2 here we can see it's fallen very low, and so is Balatro. It's a little surprising. Where did all the new games come from that they're knocking down older games? I guess Luma Island probably is new too. But yeah, the newest 3D Mark test really just does one test and puts a lot more on the screen. Just a whole new generation of more textures, more things. I've heard an argument that the latest version of Unreal Engine also was kind of designed specifically for tech demos, and in actual performance and gameplay, there's yet to be a game that really does a good job of using Unreal Engine 5 with current hardware. Which, yeah, there is a real danger there that game engines like the Unreal Engine could just go down the path of gimmickry and tech demos to convince game developers to make games using their newest software, while in reality not focusing in on optimizations that would make a lot more sense. Meanwhile, I just saw a post on Reddit a couple days ago where people are talking about how they don't want 8K graphics. They just want a smooth 60 to 120 frames per second. They don't want more detailed textures. And I do think there is definitely a point of diminishing returns. And even with my newest computer, just because of my internet not being fast enough to upload or giant files, I'm still totally planning on only doing 1080p 60 recordings. Like I see no reason to try to go to 2K or even have games render at 2K, even with a brand new computer being built. It is much more efficient for me to have a 4K monitor that is just 4 1080p screens and windows than it is to have a 4K monitor that has 4K or even upscale 2K gameplay happening. Plus, my eyesight's not getting any better, so the pixels being smaller doesn't really change a lot for me personally. I did notice I was eating a stew with some carrots in it, and I have these LED cob LED strip lights, and whatever color I have it configured to seems to really highlight and accentuate the orangeness of the carrots. And it made me wonder, if not now, almost certainly in the future, there will be fancy restaurants that have like adjustable LED lights above each plate and on a table that are going to adjust based on what dish you order to make it look even better than it normally would do. Yeah, I imagine even now though there are fancy restaurants where they have very specific wavelength light bulbs that decorators use to make the food look as good as possible. In contrast, I can definitely tell you that there are some really intentionally dim and dark areas trying to hide the ability to look at the food. But yeah, I was really shocked. The thing about LEDs, particularly RGB LEDs though, is you can get the frequency response on specific colors to be much more focused and higher than what you would do with just a general full spectrum light bulb or just being outside. Like by lighting up specifically just reds and then greens and blues, while to a human eye that might look like white, to things that will reflect that color only the reds at that wavelengths, the greens at that wavelengths, and the blues at that wavelength are going to really reflect well. I'm not sure how far you could really go with that, but you could potentially make somebody wearing the right kind of makeup look very cartoony. A real actor. Anyways, my chart here. Let's see where we have. Let's see, Black Myth Wukong is still fairly high. So if Stalker 2 is going to start showing up, we can see that it would need to go 39 sample dates, or roughly 40 sample dates, in the first place position to beat Black Myth Wukong. I sample it 3 times a week, so that would be 13 weeks in first place to beat Black Myth Wukong in relevancy. Of course, it could also be in lower positions and take a little bit longer, but overall, that does highlight to me something the previous chart wouldn't show, which is that Black Myth Wukong has been around long enough on the top 100, even if it is really at the 80th spot instead of the 100th spot. 80 over 100, which would be the 20th spot, versus 100 over 100, which would be the first spot. So yeah, it would be a while before it showed up on my chart, which that's kind of the point of my chart overall, is to show much more of a long-term perspective on games and weed out 1 week, 2 week successes. You have some pretty big games that are new on sale being highlighted at the top here, but imagine the rest of the sale is still going to be the same as what we saw on Wednesday. Oh, wait a minute. Earn free stickers by exploring your discovery queue. So we do have now a point where trading cards are not being focused on at all. Although it feels to me like what they've done is taken the concept of trading cards, but removed the Steam Marketplace reselling aspect to it. So yeah, there will be no official point, I imagine, in which they say trading cards are dead until there's just no more trading cards being sold on the Steam Marketplace, which, yeah, it'd almost take legal action for Valve to really go down that path and get rid of the Steam Marketplace for selling trading cards and game skins, Counter-Strike 2 skins in particular. But this definitely is the line in the sand where even doing big sales now, they are not encouraging people to do trading cards and instead introducing stickers as an alternate. The Steam Deck here, I assume, is still in stock, and 25% off still seems like a really good option. I just don't really think that there's enough of a reason to not go that direction and get an LCD version if you need it cheap. Now is a good time, even without sales, to get an OLED 512 version also. would say. I just don't think you're going to see a new version in the next 6 months. Yep. This time next year, maybe, there will be a new version, but yeah. This sale also perhaps highlighting the desire to have new Steam Decks be announced and come out, or at least be on sale. Maybe new Steam Decks will come out in the first quarter of the year or second quarter of the year, and then sales of those new versions will be always available every year during the fall and winter sales. And the new and trending, as far as I can tell, is just not being depicted in this layout for the Steam sale. And yeah, that might be an indication that new and trending is also being experimented with as far as being released. Instead, what they have here is a popular new releases section that I just scrolled by, not even really paying attention to, and an upcoming section, which even that, it's kind of weird that this is being combined into one. But yeah, new and trending, it's not here. Not here at all. And let's see, Discovery Queue seems to have changed quite a bit here, in that it is now just a giant slideshow. It's probably trying to target more of the Steam Deck. So if you want to put something on your follow list in particular, you would have to click view on the Steam page, because it's just not here. You can either go to the Steam page and add it to the follow list. Ooh, that might be an indication that follow list might go away. If follow lists go away, well then I would have to put everything in my follow list on my wish list, and that would be a nightmare scenario, certainly. Clearly, at the very least, it's not being emphasized. Now, I do have to applaud this design mostly because this is faster. It's all one page. There's no page load, which always a page load every time you click forward to the next thing in the Discovery Queue before. Plus, this is not loading the entire store page, which is saving them bandwidth almost certainly. The only real issue I'd say is perhaps it just needs to be more reactive and scaled up. Like, these circles could be on the very edge. You know, this could be a little bit lower, this could be a little bit higher. This clearly is not showing you everything you really needed to see. It is just kind of squishing down some bits of information. And it is really highlighting on these ideas of just having you watch the videos here. And when this video is done, nothing's going to happen. Yeah, you're not going to see any screenshots or move on to the next video. One question I guess to ask here is that you could get 6 more free stickers by going through it again. Inherently, this makes this really fast if you just wanted to click through all of these very quickly and not really look at the game. Yeah. And I imagine there is a real danger here that you are just going to encourage people to... this is, I think, based off of a anime that I was thinking about watching. I'm gonna end up going through a lot of anime, I can tell, in the recent near future. Just because, you see, that's my default. Either watch dumb anime or watch dumb horror movies. Might find something else to watch, but there really isn't too many different other genres I tend to watch. Generally, I'm looking for things that won't take up too much of my attention or too much of my time, which I'm playing still a lot of the Pokemon trading card game, which has its second promo event going on in the solo events now. So I have in that collected all of the stickers, which maybe means there's no repetitions. Which would be way more generous, I guess, than what was happening with the trading cards. Now, I don't know if stickers are single use items or infinite use items. So, yeah. As I understand it, stickers are things that you would just use in the chat but they may be single use items. Let's see. We could just go ahead and grab this because with the store points. Let's see what else. These would have just been the individual things. So you buy games and you earn points. So you're not getting trading cards for buying games anymore either. And the other offerings here are kind of pathetic. I probably wasted way more points than I should have. Yeah, nothing really has changed here. Seasonal badges. Don't think I really want that either. Community awards. Like really, for the Steam Deck in particular, you want to start up movies, and you want to save for startup movies and maybe keyboard layouts. Not buy a bunch of things like this. Yeah, I guess stickers though are not limited in use though, so but clearly you can see they're also just trying to monetize what were things that would have been given away previously for free for purchasing games in general. Let's see if we reload this. Now I own all 17 of 17 items by buying that bundle, which I think has done absolutely nothing for me. So notice how the page here encourages you to spend points for no real reward. There isn't even like a game profile or anything here that unlocks by owning all of these items. So yeah, market still exists, see what's mostly being sold though is going to be Dota and Counter-Strike 2 items though. And my inventory of items are in part still going to be a lot of trading card things. I guess I could potentially convert everything that I have into gems if trading cards are really going away. And then maybe try and sell the bags of gems for a few pennies. But the level system of badges, like here's Steam Summer Sale 2024 was the last thing. I did not get a badge for a nomination. No, I did just get a badge for this. So they are doing badges, but trading cards getting converted into badges, I think, is going away as a concept. Almost anybody who's played a lot of games is going to have this situation where you have 3 out of 5 things, because it was always balanced that way, that you couldn't get all of the trading cards without trading. And I imagine games that have card drops remaining would still drop cards for you. But for most people, you are going to have this situation where you're just going to have a lot of unfinished trading card collection things. Trading cards, particularly when there isn't a game behind it, if it isn't like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh, have no value, I think, in modern times. Whereas when I was a kid, there definitely was a push, I'm not sure it even succeeded there, for the concept of trading cards just as trading cards, baseball cards, things like that. But that is just not interactive enough compared to modern games, as far as how the whole system is set up, particularly since these are digital trading cards. These are effectively the predecessors to NFTs, the only difference there being that these trading cards are not randomized and uniquely verified by a blockchain. But yeah, they are the same kind of valueless things that Steam encouraged a lot of people. See, that's 150 of 768 badges. And not all of them are unfinished. Many of them are finished. But then it was always a terrible system too, where you would trade out your trading cards to complete badges. You can see a lot of these. I haven't even played the games yet. In the case where you're trading out complete things, you can see a lot of these are Steam in particular. You can still go back and look at the cards, but only if you click specifically on that badge, and then click specifically on the image. I don't even think you're really encouraged to be able to download the images and keep them for your own use. You almost certainly do not own the copyright to any of these images, nor can you really do anything with them. And there are 5 levels in most games to collect all of these cards 5 times over, so you have to get 1 full set to go to level 1, 1 full set to level 2, so on and so on. And that's all just so that you can have a ridiculous level, which your ridiculous level would have to be insanely high, up into the 3, 4, 500s, to increase your booster pack eligibility, which I've had very few booster packs ever crafted, maybe 2 or 3 in over the course of 7 years at my level, which is very high actually, because most of the people that were doing badge trading were bots and very poor people with way too much time on their hand. So I don't really mourn the loss of trading cards and them going away, other than it is slightly more greedy on Steam's part. Of course, it has also been 45 minutes and we haven't gone through a single bit of video game news yet, so I am moving very slow today. Yeah, just under $300, going to be over $300 when you have to pay tax for the 64 gigabyte LCD version. At that price point, I'm not 100% sure you could get a $60 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte card to replace it, and that would take some extra work. So I don't think I'd really recommend that version. I definitely would say jump up to this and save yourself the frustration. It's not even, it's not even $50 difference there. It's $40 really. So yeah, it's definitely more logical to get the 512 gigabyte version LCD if you're going to get that. This is perhaps a statement on just inflation in general, that we are far past the point where a game console can reasonably be purchased for $200, and we are now past the point where it's not even reasonable to expect to spend only $300, including tax, on video games. We are approaching $360 to $400, including tax, and that's not even talking about tariffs potentials. Now, when you see $336 versus $679, that is basically double the price for these limited edition 1 terabyte OLED version. So I can't really say that's worth it. But I generally still would recommend the 550 512 OLED version. But the price is fairly different there. You have to admit, like 336 versus 549, $200 difference at that point for OLED and the newer APU, GPU, and Wi-Fi chip and better battery life because of the newer APU, GPU, CPU. That's still a lot of money. $200 difference. Like I definitely would recommend, particularly since how little I've actually played my Steam Deck, start with this one and then plan to upgrade in potentially 6 to 18 months. Yeah, I still don't think you really need the docking station. Alright, so that's going to bring us to Video Games Chronicles news. So let's go through that. Actually looks like a decent amount of news today, considering how it's kind of Thanksgiving week. But yeah, I wouldn't have expected so much video game news. I also saw on Reddit that there was some statement made by Elon Musk, who is making a lot of statements these days about potentially making a video game company, potentially using AI generated content. If it happens, it probably wouldn't happen anytime soon, and it would be a real long time before they release the game and before anybody could really say anything at all. So yeah, him starting a new company versus anybody else starting a new company really is just not newsworthy as far as information goes. Honestly, pretty much all news stories where somebody starts a video game company is not really news. just because of the long development time there. So yeah, I can really only have no comment at this point. Apparently a Horizon clone called Light of Moitram is coming to the PS5 and iOS as extended gameplay trailers been revealed. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see if Sony decides that they own the trademark or copyright to animal robots, which I think Zoids would certainly be prior art to that. Zoids being an anime of robotic animals from the 80s. But yeah, I could see how Sony might try to just sue a company out of oblivion. And this might be yet another example of where copyright is hindering competition in the creative endeavors of making video games. Certainly, if you looked at previous art, if, for instance, Michelangelo's David somehow became copyrighted and then nobody else could make a human sculpture at all, then society would have suffered horribly artistically by the lack of any real other human sculptures being made. But yeah, video games have gotten way too much protection, I think, in copyright terms, when I don't think it really is going to lose Sony even a single sale if a Horizon clone did get released and sold. Now, also the fact that it's coming to the PS5 may mean they've already gotten on good terms with Sony, so maybe there won't be any lawsuits. Interesting, it's only going to PS5 and iOS. You don't see that combination too often. There's also a possibility that all of the Horizon 2 haters might jump on to a game like this if a game like this tends to just focus more on the gameplay and less on stories that the haters don't like. Looking at the Asian writing here, I could heavily also suspect that this is a game being developed by like a Chinese company that is going to not do it particularly well. This is a 16-minute video. Just jumping in randomly, we're seeing a lot more survival and crafting elements than I think Horizon actually has, which that definitely would take the game in a different direction if you are doing a lot more crafting and base building, which is what it looks like is going on here. Of course, there's a weird contrast here that now they're running around a much more modern location. Activating some kind of device. Spawning in a robot. Yes, this definitely doesn't feel like it's even going to really play like Horizon. So while visually it may look the same, it's not going to have that same stalking in the grass stealth element, according to this trailer, or this section of the video. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a more of a focus on multiple people playing at the same time, although that looks like that might be a familiar and an NPC. So yeah, it definitely looks like it's going to be a different game in a lot of aspects compared to Horizon, even if it visually on the surface looks the same. Which at a certain point then it's not really even a clone, it is just an homage or parody. In this case I'd say homage because I'm not sensing any real comedy being involved. Watch Dogs Legion is apparently getting a sequel in the form of an interactive audio experience, which is weird to say the least, but perhaps this is some way that they can wind down Watch Dogs as a series while giving it some kind of finality. Or maybe it's a way to keep Watch Dogs alive in the minds of people without actually coming out with another bad Watch Dogs game. At a certain point, I would also have to say that even Assassin's Creed is not doing well enough to justify the Assassin's Creed inspired futuristic spin-off of Watch Dogs Legion to exist, or Watch Dogs to exist in general. Let's see, the Pokemon Trading Card Pocket's new Venusaur Solo Battle event is live now. Seems like we're going to get updates on this card game for a while. Which, in fairness, we haven't ever seen Pokemon TCG Live have events that got talked about as far as Video Games Chronicles. So yeah, you play the event, you get one promo card each victory, I think, or each time you achieve an achievement. The promo cards are kind of random, but there is a very high chance you will get at least one copy of them. What kind of sucks about the promo cards is that they have this little promo label on them, and the game is not really living up to the idea that you could double click and see the art alone. Although I should double check that. Maybe there is a way you could go look at the cards and just see the card art and not see the text and not see the promo stamp and not see the border. But as far as I can tell, you will always have this sticker on it. And so the art just doesn't look as good as you would like it to look because of that. And these are decent cards that help you get stronger cards that you otherwise would have to either spend real world money or struggle to get lucky enough to get. But yeah, these aren't EX cards as far as the Venusaur card is. It is just a third level evolution. And they definitely are trying to, with the current first expansion, trying to get everybody to own all of the base 150 Pokemon, 151 Mewtwo Pokemon, and Venusaur, and Pikachu, and Charmander, and yeah, I think that's it that they mostly want you to have. But yeah, they're not. There aren't any of the later Pokemon really available. And they aren't moving particularly too fast, so I personally will have at least one copy of every of the base 151 Pokemon that they have cards for, which I think is all of them. But if they do start moving too fast, I could see it becoming overwhelming very quickly. And only a few of the cards are good enough really to play. There's a lot of cards that are just very weak and you couldn't play them. And I still am not happy that the game gives you different language versions of cards to potentially collect. That's very sleazy. Or that the game really doesn't encourage you to play the Pokemon card game at all. Or that there isn't perhaps an advanced way to play. That would be something to add in the future too. Where you are playing the 6 points instead of playing the 3 points. But yeah, I've kind of settled in as far as my appreciation of the Pokemon TCG Pocket game. And it is what it is, and what it is okay, but not great. Let's see, Liza P DLC is coming in the first quarter of 2025 as the developer confirms the next game. The team behind Liza P are working on a sci-fi title as well as a sequel, which I don't think Liza P was a sci-fi title. Most current best-selling mobile games break rules on disclosing loot boxes. The BBC says one researcher claims that 90% of games with loot boxes don't mention them in ads. Interesting. And is this... Yeah, this is a UK Advertising Standards Agency rule, which is to say they are making the ads globally and then airing them in the UK and not caring about the UK's laws, which is probably just the beginning of the kinds of shady things that ads for games do. Yeah, that is certainly just another aspect of where mobile games in particular are just not good digital citizens for the community and for creating a marketplace that isn't just full of terrible games trying to swindle you out of money. Speaking of being good digital citizens, the Australia, I think, has passed a law, at least if they haven't fully ratified it yet, it's very close to being ratified, that will ban all social media for teenagers under 16. It is a particularly censorious and restrictive law, taking the decision out of the hands of parents. Well, just face it, most parents would be wise to not let their kids be on social media until they're 16. That being said, let's also face it, kids are going to be on social media regardless if there's a law or not. And the last thing you want to do is start criminalizing or even civilly punishing, but with fines, people or even corporations because a kid broke a law. Last thing we need to do is have Chinese-style re-education camps because kids went on social media for kids. Australia is particularly censorious and conservative, and there doesn't seem to be any real effort or success or in any counter argument against that. And certainly I would want kids to not be on social media for the state of current social media, but in reality I think it probably hurts kids more if they are not connecting and dealing with their peers socially, which would be through some form of social media more than even direct communication. Ironically, there's a whole circular logic here in that kids are constantly told not to talk in class, and so their real opportunities to socialize with their peers would be at school in the hallways, which they're often told not to talk in the hallways, or at least not talk too much or not talk too loud. They're given extremely short amounts of time to even be in the hallways from class to class. Kids don't have recess outside of elementary school, so there's no real point to talk there. There are even schools that don't allow talking in the lunchroom for a time or for the whole duration, which, yeah. So you're on the bus maybe and you can talk if you're on the bus, but a lot of times you're told not to talk there. there's kind of a constant barrage of adults telling kids not to talk. And yeah, that certainly was the thought 100 years ago. Kids should be seen, not heard. And that's really what you're in the danger of getting back to, is that this idea that kids can't socialize in person, which would be my preferred way of them socializing. And now you're telling them they can't socialize at their leisure when they have free times online. That is just going to further create awkwardly social people who can't interact with each other. And even now, there's an argument that the current generation of people is very much awkwardly social, not because of social media, maybe easier seen because of social media, but because of the fact that people weren't able to communicate face-to-face. Communication face-to-face is better because you can see the hurt in someone's eyes if you say something mean, or if you, the happiness in someone's eyes if you say something nice. Where social media, a lot of that sarcasm and emotional aspects get misread or amplified when not meant to be amplified. Yeah, I would definitely lean more, in my personal opinion, that we should have safe social media sites for kids. And probably it should be some kind of like PBS style organization creating something run by the government, if not funded heavily by the government, in the United States and around the world. If every postal system had a social media site that you could go on and talk, that would probably be great. Even if secretly or very publicly all your conversations were being scanned by the postal systems and sent to the FBI or CIA, whatever equivalent you have in your country. Like, for general communication, that would be fine. It is crazy that so many local governments have Facebook pages instead of there being a .gov social media site that people actually go to and view. And I know in the United States they've actively made laws that prevents the post office from offering things like email or social media sites, any kind of online news services at all, which is just kind of crazy. But yeah, a government run or government funded PBS style social media sites for kids would be the best way. There would be some level of accountability or direct influence by the US government if it got out of hand, and it would stay around a lot longer than, say, a Disney run social media site, which may still be full of Disney ads. We are certainly moving towards things like Blue Sky and federated systems like that, so it is also very questionable how Australia is going to enforce any of this new law, short of just trying to fine companies that aren't going to likely pay the fine. Moving on, Microsoft Flight Sim 2024 Studio says launch issues have now been resolved. The 8BitDo is releasing a official Xbox version of its retro keyboard, which is really just a color palette swap from the NES and Famicom and C64 versions. Although noticeably, it is worth pointing out that two giant buttons don't mean anything to an Xbox, an original Xbox, and the original Xbox, I do not believe, ever had a keyboard accessory at all. Yeah. So they are reaching with different color palettes here from what would be realistic and what people would even be really nostalgic for. Of course, as a hardware manufacturer, palette swaps are not a terrible thought by any means, but they're running out of ideas quickly. They'll come out with an all-white one for PlayStation at some point, I bet. unless PlayStation threatens to sue them. Well, the law and legal action seems to be continuing, as Xbox says it is blocked from selling and launching games from its Android app, and Google says it isn't being blocked. Let's see. Sarah Bond, I don't know who that is, claims the company is still waiting for a court order to allow it. Which, having 3 people mentioned, we're starting to see people use Blue Sky as their news sources also. So yeah, there's legal wrangling going on, but inevitably I can't imagine it isn't going to be a case where you do start to see apps being installed via Google Play that are just going to be Xbox apps or game launcher apps that are going to then install their own apps and have their own marketplace while still benefiting from being on Google Play also. Which at some point there might be an argument that if Microsoft is going to have an Xbox app store that installs apps on Windows, that Google is going to say we want Google Play and our Google apps on your launch store too. And we'll see if that argument holds weight or not with the court systems. It is certainly 2 companies that are both in hot water with the US government at the moment. 2 giant companies fighting it out in courts. Meanwhile, there aren't any major smaller companies that are really benefiting that much either. You're not going to see companies like Nutaku, for instance, all of a sudden having a launcher for their adult apps be installable via the Google Play Store. And that's where new competition and different kinds of competition really could come into play. And I doubt we'll see Apple ever coming out with an Android app launcher. Let's see. Palworld's next major update is coming next month. It adds a new DLC island 6 times larger than the last. So obviously the lawsuit is not moving particularly fast, and no stay has been passed in Japan to prevent them from continuing to operate. Let's see. Tencent's players are accusing Tencent's latest game of copying Sony Horizon's series. Light of Mortrium bears more than a passing resemblance to Guerrilla's games. Yeah. You can definitely see that there is some blatant idea theft happening here. Is it a true saying that to be Chinese is to steal? Particularly in game development, I think that has been shown to be the case. But yeah, I don't know if people should really care even. Like, in the actual demo that we already looked at, it looks like it plays very differently. And I don't think there really is going to be a ton of confusion as far as who goes and tells somebody, buy me the game with the red-headed girl in the leather native clothing in a post-apocalyptic grassy field. Is that really how you're going to ask your parent or tell somebody to buy your game? Or are you going to say, buy me Horizon or Horizon Zero Dawn, or buy me Light of Mortrium? Yeah. So yeah, the question is really, where is the confusion and who really is being confused? And the fact that copyright leans so much on the idea that there might be brand confusion is a bad less than objective metric to use in the first place. So, and it also looks like this game is just going to have a pal, always a NPC character. Yeah. The danger certainly here with this is that there is inherently a group of people that don't like Ryzen. Inherently there's a group of people that don't like Tencent. Inherently there's a group of people that don't like Chinese companies in general. And so there's going to be a lot of noise. And even when this game comes out and we start to see reviews, there is still potentially going to be a fear that the reviews are going to be biased and noisy. I imagine this game would come out and it is going to be an average 7 out of 10 anyways, just looking at it. It will just be this survival game that is way too similar to every other survival game there is. Moving on, the new PS5 disk drive stock is starting to arrive in the UK, with one retailer increasing its price. Currys is selling it for £109. Pokemon fans opened 20,000 cards in 24 hours to break the Guinness World Record. Over 15,000 Pokemon card packs were opened to break the world record. So you open 15 packs, 1,500 packs to get 20,000 cards. Okay. Yeah. I guess that's a thing. I don't know if there's really much more to say here. It is interesting how you have this photo here of just adults lying on card packs instead of kids. It is kind of shocking here that there isn't a picture here of just a whole bunch of kids or a whole bunch of cards being shown. It was the longest live stream unboxing. 30 influencers opened 20,000 plus cards. So it was a bunch of YouTubers and adults opening card packs. Interesting. Which that might very much be a highlight of where the Pokemon card game is going in the real world, is that actual kids are not opening packs or buying packs, and instead they're just watching people online open packs. Which might explain the digital card game's popularity some more. Let's see. Nintendo is also targeting yet another group of people with a lawsuit. Members of a popular Switch piracy subreddit. They want to subpoena the records of several domains, including Reddit. So, I think it's fair to say that the new guy in charge of Nintendo now is going and intentionally allowing very heavy anti-piracy movement. This is assumed because the next Nintendo console is going to be only minimally more secure, if in any way more secure, than the current Switch is, and that they just didn't put any new technology and new effort into it. Which, in fairness, there's definitely more security you could have put into it. You could have definitely had like TPM style, trusted platform module style hardware built into every new Nintendo console that would prevent games from being traded or used as easily, and better encryption and things along those lines. But yeah, they definitely didn't seem like they're doing it. Nintendo might be at a slight disadvantage by having a portable console that still doesn't really require online connectivity. Whereas if they, in their new console, said you must be connected to the internet to play these games and verify them, then that might have been more of a thing. It's kind of funny, you could even regress to older technologies where you would have to text or call a phone number to get a key to activate a product if it's not connected to the internet. But yeah, I bet it doesn't have any major security improvements at all. Also, I guess they are probably very sensitive in the fact that that first generation of the Nintendo Switch, which was very insecure, was so quickly and so easily hacked. And so they are potentially actively just targeting the people that they think would be the people that would hack the next Nintendo console in a campaign of terror, effectively, to hope that when the next Nintendo console launches in just about 2 months, well, it could be somewhere between 2 months and I guess as many as 4 months. But yeah, they may just be trying to prevent that same thing from happening again. Moving on, Keiichiro Toyama says he's considering a AAA Siren successor, while at PlayStation, Slitterhead was born from Toyama's idea for Siren 3. Interesting. I don't remember a Siren series. So, if this is screenshots from a game called Siren, I don't recognize any of this at all. Yeah, Siren might have been not very popular. It may have never even come to the West. I guess I can't say too much there, since I don't know Siren. Baldur's Gate 3 is going to add crossplay and 12 subclasses in the photo mode next year, which is a lot, certainly, but over the course of a year it makes sense. I don't know the game well enough, though, to know if 12 subclasses would be enough to convince somebody to go and play the game a second time or swap classes. Which, that's, I assume, what you would have to do. Although, since Baldur's Gate 3 is based off Dungeons and Dragons, maybe you start over a lot more often than I think you do. Because to me, it definitely felt like Baldur's Gate 3 was more of a narrative one-game playthrough style game where you just go through it once and that would be it. Steam launched its autumn sale featuring thousands of discounts. Here they've got a small list of, what is that, 7 games that they're highlighting. It's interesting that there's a trailer video here where, yeah, I guess this trailer video did come out and I just kind of skipped it on YouTube. Yeah, the trailer video, I imagine, is something that would have had to have been created a while back. So things like Dead Island 2 being highlighted don't really make a lot of sense, or Raft being highlighted doesn't really make that much sense. I would have to assume that anything in these trailers are things that either are very popular and Valve wanted it in this trailer, or paid for a prominent location. Yeah, that game Soul Mask, for instance, I've never even heard of. Let's go back here a little bit. Yeah, I don't even know what you do in that game other than dance around and get drunk. I can't help but wonder if the anime delivery girl from Steam, which is quickly becoming a constant mascot, is intentionally designed and hoping to become a mascot to get away from the head with a valve in the back of it being the mascot of Valve, and or Gabe Newell in general just being the mascot of Valve, although Valve and Steam are different companies. But yeah, I could see trying to have Delivery Girl being the mascot and people be more interested in her than talking about Gabe Newell, although Gabe Newell is a living meme as it is, so I imagine people would still talk about him up until his either departure from Valve or death. December's PlayStation Plus Essential and Classic games have been announced. Which, yep. 19,000 Black Ops 6 ranked player cheaters have been banned, as Activision is making hourly sweeps. Interesting. It's crazy how many news stories there are today. Black version of the PlayStation Portals reportedly coming soon. Some of these might be older stories, come to think of it at this point. Yeah. These are older stories. So my macro must have just not saved its position correctly. Good, we don't need to talk about these. Although these... And that'll save me some time. I guess the question is, how far back did this go? Yeah, some of these stories look really, really old at this point. Well, I'm almost done. Totally missed a story here, apparently. IO has pulled Hitman content featuring Conor McGregor following a court ruling. Oh. Well, I could see why you would do that if he was found guilty of something. Of sexually assaulting someone, it seems. At a certain point, though, also, it seems kind of just pointless. Pulling content, I guess, is inherently the problem there. Because then you're taking it away from people who might still want to play it or might historically still want that content just because you don't want to be associated with it. I could see pulling content from being on sale, but letting people still have it or making it for sale with a warning. Ideally, in these situations, I'd say let's continue to sell the product but give all the proceeds to the victim or something along that line. In this case, this person was found guilty and fined a bunch of money, so any money that Conor McGregor makes potentially is going to the victim anyways. So this cancel culture idea of making it more difficult for him to make money is actually counterintuitive for actually helping the victim. Certainly it's an icky situation, but I think you hurt society more than you help by just pulling content from sale. You almost certainly help your company, though, and there is definitely some weirdness there, and that companies often benefit when society does not. Moving on to Gematsu articles, hopefully there's fewer of that. In this one, it says Light of Mortrium is coming to iOS and Android, which is not what Video Games Chronicled said, which might highlight a bias in that Video Games Chronicle either missed the Android announcement or doesn't care about Android. Let's see, P47.2 MD information reveals special live stream has been set for December 1st. I assume this is an old Mega Drive, maybe remaster of a old Mega Drive game. Project Mugen has been officially titled Ananta Ananta, I guess is maybe how you pronounce it. Which, okay. So they changed the name or gave her an official name. Neverness to Everness details new features and lore, and as the closed beta test begins in China. This is not a game I recognize at all. Let's see. And with these screenshots, it looks to me like it's a weird kind of Persona-like style dungeon crawler, if I was to guess, with maybe some car elements and driving elements too. Well, it seems weird, and that's about all I can say. Jumping Jazz Cats launches January 30th. You play, race, and hang with your feline friends. It's weird that we're going to potentially get a lot of new games being announced so late into the year. Victory Heat Rally for Switch launches December 12th. Beyond the Ice Palace 2 has been delayed to March 13th. I can say just March 13th at this point and not say 2025. The Famitsu sales from the 18th to the 24th have been updated. Let's see. Nintendo Switch back to dominating with the exception of Dragon Quest III in the 3rd spot for the PS5. And then the next PlayStation game is all the way in the 19th position with Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection for the PS4. And we do have a couple PS5 games in the 22nd and 23rd spot and the 29th spot. Hardware sales, I imagine, is still staggeringly high for the Switch and shockingly low for the PlayStation, with surprisingly high numbers for the Xbox Series. And interesting, the Xbox Series X Digital Edition has come out on top this week, whereas it tends to be, I think, more at the bottom. Dave the Diver has sold, sales have topped 5 million. The mech animal open world survival crafting game Light of Mortium has been announced. So this game was really announced very quickly and then immediately getting accused of being a clone, because clearly it is a clone. In a lot of ways, though, I have to say that there should be more clones of games. Honestly, this game kind of feels closer to a Monster Hunter game, I would say, than the looks and the feel of Horizon. And its gameplay features, frankly, seem to be more of just a survival game anyways. The lack of focus on fighting the robots may very well make it feel nowhere as interesting as Horizon felt in its gameplay. And getting that gameplay loop correct can change things drastically, certainly. Suffice it to say, I will be putting it on my follow list. Metabots Survivors has been announced for iOS and Android, which never felt like Metabots was particularly highly popular in the West. It may have been a lot more popular in the East, but not anywhere as popular as like Digimon or Pokemon at the same time. But it certainly is the case that a game like that should have been released on mobile, potentially 10 years ago even. In a smaller market with less competition, mobile gaming, playing on minor nostalgic things might be very interesting. The trick with Metabots is that there were these like coins you would put in the heads of the robots. This was like the main protagonist's Metabot to start with, and he'd defeat another robot and then get the coin, and the coin would change either the abilities or actually change the pieces of equipment equipped to the main character, which perhaps is why it wasn't as popular, is because you had toys effectively that I imagine they wanted to sell where the parts were interchangeable, but that also makes a protagonist character interchangeable and not visually recognizable. Pokemon wouldn't have been anywhere as popular if Pikachu every episode was evolving into a different Pokemon or looking different, had different colors or different clothing on, or something like that. Shiren the Wanderer, The Mystery of Dungeon of Serpent Coil Island for PC launches December 11th. Chrono Sword launches in early access for PC on December 6th. Notice how we had 2 PC exclusive announcements there. Palworld's next major update launches in December, adds new islands 6 times the size of Sakurajimi. I'm not sure the size of the islands matters, but I don't really know the gameplay of Palworld either, so maybe the size of the islands really do matter. Apparently there's going to be a Terraria crossover, which I didn't know Terraria really had a main protagonist character. Let's see. Baby Steps, Stick to It Stickman, and Skate Story have all been delayed to 2025. This is 3 Devolver Digital published games being delayed. And that's going to bring us to gaming on Linux with their specific highlight of games that would run on Linux. But yeah. They're highlighting fairly popular games that aren't particularly discounted by as much, instead of highlighting games that are very much discounted. It's interesting they are endorsing Mad Max still as something worth playing, or Mass Effect Legendary Edition, something worth playing. They have the latest Prime Gaming, highlighting what level of compatibility these Prime games are compatible with the Steam Deck. Also highlighting what launcher these games would be launching through. Notably, none of them are going to be launching through Steam itself. Theme Park Builder Parkitect is getting a campaign editor, and a new DLC is on the way. itch.io Creator Day is live today, where they take no cuts from the devs alongside with the autumn sale. So that's an interesting thought, certainly, to take no cut one day out of the year. Although I'm not sure that makes great business sense. Survival game The Last Plague Blight adds controller support and apparently is now great for Steam Deck. Baldur's Gate getting crossplay in photo mode and 12 subclasses. The Latin cowboy casual farming sim Gaucho and the Grassland has a new demo released. That is a interesting title and an interesting theme. Although it does certainly highlight something. I don't think this game looks particularly that interesting. It does certainly highlight the biases and perspectives that you see in games. And you could effectively have a farming simulator game from hundreds of different cultures and communities around the world, but overwhelmingly you always see farming simulators run out of Western style farming places. Yeah, there might be like one where you're an Asian rice grower growing rice. There's one game like that, but it also has some RPG elements. But then Stardew Valley and all of them are, this is basically some farmer in the United States grasslands growing corn and carrots and potatoes and things like that. Or you're an alien farmer, and I don't even think there are too many games where you're farming alien foods or crops. Even. Yeah. The slime laundry service anime I've been watching certainly does push me to want to play Slime Rancher as a video game. I can't imagine that there is a coincidence there. I imagine somebody did play Slime Rancher as a game, and that kind of is a farming, but it's more of a ranching experience. I'd also say there is an interesting thought as far as the economics of fantasy worlds and like the slime raising anime, in that in every single fantasy world basically there are monsters that you can kill and hunt. Effectively being a poacher is what you would be called in the real world, is you'd be hunting on some land that doesn't belong to you. And even at that, even if you could go out into a proper hunting area and not have to pay licenses and fees, in the real world you could never hunt enough deer or cows or chickens or anything. You couldn't hunt those kinds of animals and get enough meat for it to be worth your time and for you to become successful as an animal hunter. It is just not really a career path. Yeah, because the monsters in fantasy games drop items that are highly valuable, whereas deer and cow, at some point, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, yes, you could have probably been a buffalo hunter and hunted buffalo and gotten paid by the US government a decent amount to kill buffalo as a way of starving out the Native Americans. But that would have been about the only time you could have been a hunter in recent time. Perhaps 1,000 years ago you could have been a hunter and hunted food and sold it in shops. But yeah, the economics there just don't really exist, and honestly we couldn't go back to that point either, not unless something drastically changed. I imagine a lot of people though would take on paths and career paths of being hunters in the real world versus being burger flippers, if they had the choice. Anyways, I'm kind of rambling here, but this my point that I was originally trying to make is it is interesting that we don't see more farming that happens around the world. Probably because the farming that happens around the world is fairly dangerous and fairly unrefined, for lack of a better term. But yeah, it is kind of interesting also we don't have like modern styles of farming being depicted in video games. No hydroponics, no, this is being grown in a completely different way with considerably less water. Which that's another thing, is certainly you could break the economy of any world in a fantasy world if you had monsters like slimes that produced water, just water alone. If you had any magical way of making water, you would drastically change almost any society. Clean, drinkable water, even if you could generate dirty water and violate the conservation of mass and conservation of energy, that would be so helpful. A slime just constantly generating water over a wagon wheel would give you energy. They could grind mills, could give you electricity on if you connected a generator, could give you drinking water, could fertilize, could irrigate fields. Anyways, I definitely feel like I've said 3 different things in a parallel there. So let me just take a break here, move on to the next story, and move on. Okay, so Gaming on Linux says we are getting a Palworld and Terraria crossover, where Palworld with the major update of Palworld in December. Which a Palworld Terraria crossover might be really good for Palworld, as it still is kind of just early access beta style game. If all of a sudden Palworld was less about Pokemon with guns, or a Pokemon like character with guns, and became Pokemon like characters that could use guns but could also use other tools, and there could be more mining and crafting actually going on there, that certainly would perhaps make Palworld more appealing. The new Nexus Mods open source cross-platform app adds Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord support. I saw a YouTube video talking about the state of Fallout 4 at the moment, and apparently it's in a very poor state, with Bethesda really not saying anything to the lines that they're going to really try that hard to improve it, or even try that hard to release a new Fallout game in a faster method. It will be interesting to see who wins that internal battle, to see how fast a Fallout game comes out, and whether it is actually developed or even handled in any way by Bethesda, or if Microsoft straight up just has another one of their departments make a game called Fallout for the release of Season 2 of the Fallout TV series. It would be very interesting, but probably far too dangerous, if you had the head of Microsoft or Xbox fire the head of Bethesda there, like, just to get some new leadership, just to get games developed in a different way, just to see Bethesda change how it does things. It would be too dangerous, because if you fired him, he'd go and start his own company and take half of his development team with him and half the audience with him. But yeah, I imagine that's why those people, those creative heads, stick around a lot more than they probably should. The Mesa 24.2.8 has been released for Linux with bug fixes. This is the last update for the 24.2 series. Now, as I'm still continuing to think about whether I want to use Gaming on Linux as a source, which I probably do, it is going to be fairly commonplace that you will get updated versions for things like Mesa, and it'll be further complicated in that there very possibly is a Mesa 25 point something release already, or a 26 point something release, and that there are just 2 or 3 levels of updates still getting put out under different numbers. And then the technicality aspects on this is not something I think most people care too much about. And in most cases, they aren't going to be targeting specific games as much as they are going to just try and fix bugs that show up in one program that would also solve the problems in several other games and programs. An incredible retro first-person shooter, Celeco, adds a new special campaign in another huge update. I don't recognize this game. It's early access. Let's see if... Click on that and see if it actually opens a page this time. Well, do have it on the follow list. It is still early access though. Early access also confuses the whole Game Awards things, or Steam Awards, quite a bit too, in that I honestly just don't feel like anything that's still early access by the time an award nomination process starts should be under consideration, because so many things never leave early access or come out of early access the next year. And frankly, games that do that should be punished some small amount by not getting the praise, at the very least, of the gaming community. The Steam Autumn Sales Live. See if they have any specific games that they're highlighting. No, not really. Not anything that special. And the Steam Deck has hit 17,000 games playable and verified. Which, yeah. 16,000 was hit in August. 11,323 are labeled as playable. 5,678 are verified. So the ones you really would want to focus on are about 16,000 games, about 17,000 games, but there's about 4,000 unsupported games. I wouldn't be surprised if Valve and Steam are working to reduce the unsupported Steam games down to 0, because that's how I imagine this really would work. Although this also is arguing that there's only 21,000 games on Steam. And I think there's a lot more than 21,000 games on Steam. So I don't know what list this really is. It might make sense if there was 21,000 Steam, not Steam, but Linux compatible games. And it would be weird that 4,000 of them are not supported on the Steam Deck in that case. But yeah, I imagine Valve would love to see this unsupported number go to approaching 0, with everything being at least playable. That's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com news, which this is still broken, so if we are going to see any news, it's probably going to be older news that we've already talked about. Excuse me. Because I've been cleaning house, I didn't grab enough water today to help with me coughing, but the other thing is, because I've been cleaning house, I've been kicking up a lot of dust, and that has been causing me to cough a lot more. Yeah, all of these stories are older ones from GameDeveloper.com, so I'm just going to go ahead and close these. Those new rules for season passes, probably in effect for the sale, but not really likely to change too much, because I doubt too many new games are even coming out. Yeah, with season passes at the moment, but eventually it will affect things. So what should be a surprise to nobody, here's a story we missed. Niantic used all of the data from Pokemon Go and Ingress to build an AI model that they have just announced as far as getting geospatial information and some images, perhaps. I'm not sure you took too many pictures that went actually to the servers when you were capturing Pokemon, but maybe you are. So yeah, it really shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that a mostly free-to-play game, although Pokemon Go, I think, and Ingress did have microtransactions, was saving that data for some future use. And honestly, they kind of made it pretty obvious anyways, in that they were having people go to specific locations to get geo data. I'm not sure that data is particularly that useful because a ton of it is going to be redundant anyways. And certainly there's more nefarious things you could have done as far as selling tracking data to advertisers, which they probably did that too. But I'm not sure Pokemon Go players should really be too upset either that they were being manipulated, used. That's just how all companies do. It is the same at CVS, in particular in Target and Walmart. Every purchase is being put into some database to be used potentially in the future for some other reason. There was a story where one of the self-DNA companies to give has just gone absolutely quiet, I believe in the European Union, and just disappeared. And so all that DNA data is now in question as far as who got it and who didn't. Not that your DNA is safe with any of those companies, because they were always saving that and selling it to marketers and giving it to police organizations. Yeah. But yeah, you got conned if you played Pokemon Go, but I imagine most people won't care. They had their fun. If you wanted to play Ingress or Pokemon Go now, I would inherently warn you against that. Anyways, Pokemon Go and Ingress never really seemed like that fun of a game in the first place. But that extra action of having to go somewhere perhaps is a red flag to look towards and look for in future games. Is if you see an app or a game that is asking you to do something out of the norm extra, that probably should raise a red flag. Reflector Entertainment is laying off 18% of its workforce. They made a game called Unknown 9. I still think most of these stories are older. Still, yeah. Alright, and that's going to bring us to the games on Steam. And yeah, certainly something has changed where these live streams are going to just be longer once we get towards October, November every year. Games just start coming out, Game Awards, video game news starts to happen a lot more, sales start to happen a lot more. So I just am not going to be able to keep it under 2 hours like I was. Inherently, maybe there's a balancing aspect that on the slower months like January and February, I could go back to playing something like Yu-Gi-Oh, but there's no point in going back to Yu-Gi-Oh. I even gave some thought of just having time clickers run in the background, but I don't think the music's good enough for time clickers to have it run in the background. But there is maybe an AFK thought where the game plays itself that I can have for the background music and for just any breaks needed. Alright, let's go through all the games on Steam and not try to wear out my voice too much. There is definitely an argument that if I went through all the new games on Steam at the beginning, which is not where I generally want it to be, I could do the whole catch up and warm up at the beginning. So yeah, maybe that is the sacrifice or the change that should happen, is that if I went through all of these at the beginning and called that the warm up, and then we went through the video game news after that point, at a certain point I have no audience on Steam, so it's hard to do any kind of tests or figure out what I would work or not. So on the other hand, if I have no audience on Steam, I can just do whatever I want. Certainly is a thought, because then I could just ramble while going. Does this have English support? Nope. It's already on the follow list. At one point I was going to like close games, or I could probably make it so when I curate things to click on anything that says language English not supported. But if it's not a link, I'm not sure I can actually click on that. If I do click on it and it's a link, then probably would open a new page. I think I may have gotten logged out. Still have a lot of horror games coming out. Really, it's just no point. Yeah, no point at all at which you stop getting horror games. I do need to go ahead and let my computer make some YouTube shorts. We are at the point now where I know for a fact that the 3-minute shorts are in the short section. I also noticed that there is a couple of shorts that came out that still ran into the problem of being rated by the ASRB M for mature, and thus the shorts didn't actually get made because it didn't click past the age verification spot. I deleted the 2 I found, but yeah. The hope is that that has been corrected. I just can't imagine for a second, though, that I, at any point here, I'm going to find any extra time to work on my macros and correct any other issues. It's just going to be in its mostly working state with a lot of issues here and there for a while. Because like, yeah, I'm just not gonna make take any extra time to do programming while also trying to clean house. Still a lot of that has to happen and needs to be done. There will be a point where I will just have heavy furniture that needs to be moved, and I'm gonna have to find somebody to help me with that. But yeah, there's still a lot to do. While I have gotten my garage cleaned, I am now filling up the garage with a lot of stuff that's going away, going bye-bye. And so I could see that the garage would just become a mess again, or it would become completely full and still I would have more stuff that needs to be moved somewhere else. I am effectively trying to clean at least 2, ideally 3 rooms, with most, if not almost everything in those rooms being emptied out of a significant amount of the stuff in them. Like, when I say cleaning house, I really do mean cleaning house. I don't mean I'm just cleaning things, although I am cleaning things too, since a lot of this stuff is going to potentially be sold. You know, one of the things I have issue with is I have a lot of random stuff that doesn't match a specific color palette or theme, and I am trying to have more consistent things. Now, it's not financially viable to it's not financially viable to just get rid of things and buy something that matches because of a color palette or something along that line, but in a lot of cases I have things that kind of do match, and then I have things that don't match, and I have things that match but don't match other things. I'm just trying to have a more consistent color or theme as far as decorating altogether. And things that don't match the theme but do match in sets can probably be sold as sets. At least one hopes that's the case. But, you know, a lot of times I have like 2 or 3 of the same thing, or similar things. I have a lot of stuff that I just don't need anymore either, particularly in kitchenware. Because yeah, I definitely don't cook as much as I had at one time been ambitious that I was going to cook. There are certain things that I just don't want anymore. In particular, I'm trying to get rid of most glassware, most things that break, because you have, even if you have a set of let's say a dozen glass dishes. You break one, well, now you don't have a set of a dozen. That's fine if you had a dozen. Let's say you had 5 glass dishes. Well, that doesn't even make a place setting of a 6-chair table if you're going for that number. And let's say you had 6, you break one, there you break your set of 6. Let's say you have 5, you break one. Okay, you still have a decent amount. But then let's say you're getting down to 3 or 4 over the course of the years. Like, if you have only 3 of a certain kind of dish, I mean, those are just oddball dishes at that point. And that's really what I'm at right now, is I have a lot of oddball dishes, a lot of oddball things. And then there's some Corningware stuff I have where big Corningware that you're going to put in an oven makes sense. A Corningware pot or pan or dish, well, it's not going to be called a pot or pan, but a Corningware dish that can bake a cake, perfectly acceptable. A small Corningware that would only hold leftovers, though, makes no sense in 2024, where you can get extremely cheap, easy to throw away Rubbermaid or Rubbermaid like plastic store and go containers. Or you can even get the containers that are used in restaurants if you go down to a restaurant supply company, which will be even cheaper. Point being there, it's not ceramic, it's not something that's going to shatter. So if you have a Corningware that you would never put in an oven and you would never cook anything in it because it's so small, those things don't really need to exist anymore. They maybe make some sense if you're trying to avoid microplastics. I don't think it's going to change too much though if you're going to do that, but mostly they are going to just gather dust in your cabinets. And I can say this from experience because I have a lot of stuff that has just gathered dust in my cabinets. Anyways, none of that has anything to do with video games. Unless this stream just screws up right now, it looks like everything worked today. No drop frames, no rendering lag or encoding lag worth mentioning. There's always like 162 frames that are render lagged at the very beginning of a stream, but that's kind of it. That's still 0.0%. Alright, well, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.